This podcast is supported by MIDI Health. Are you in midlife, feeling dismissed, unheard, or just plain tired of the old healthcare system? You're not alone. For too long, women's serious midlife health issues have been trivialized, ignored, and met with a just deal with it attitude. Many of us have been made to feel ashamed or forgotten. In fact, even today, 75% of women seeking care for menopause and perimenopause issues are left entirely untreated. But here's the powerful truth. It's time for a change. It's time for MIDI. MIDI is not just a healthcare provider. It's a women's telehealth clinic, founded and supported by world-class leaders in women's health. What sets MIDI apart? We are the only women's telehealth brand covered by major insurance companies, making high-quality expert care accessible and affordable. Our clinicians provide one-on-one, face-to-face consultations where they truly listen to your unique needs. We offer a full range of holistic, data-driven solutions, from hormonal therapies and weight loss protocols to lifestyle coaching and preventative health guidance. This isn't one-size-fits-all care. This is care uniquely tailored for you. At MIDI, you will join our patients who feel seen, heard, and prioritized. You will find that our mission is clear: to help all women thrive in midlife, giving them access to the health care they deserve. Because we believe midlife isn't the middle at all. It is the beginning of your second act. Ready to feel your best and write your second act script? Visit joinmidi.com today to book your personalized insurance-covered virtual visit. That's joinmidi.com. MIDI, the care women deserve.
I realized that having boundaries is a gift that you're giving yourself. And boundaries are there to protect us. Our bodies, our souls, our minds, our homes, all of these are so sacred. They really are. So when you have boundaries, you are showing yourself honor. You're giving yourself a gift that no one else is going to give you. No one else is going to have boundaries for you. You have to establish them for yourself.
Welcome back to the Two Promises Podcast. Let's dive right into another exciting adventure with BD and crew as he pursues his new passion of one day finding the most epic bourbon. The Two Promises team send their special thanks to Hobie and the Huckleberries for their masterful theme music. So grab a glass, relax, and enjoy responsibly.
Baby says she's leaving if I don't stop drinking wine. So I switched to whiskey and I'm feeling fine. Drinking that smooth whiskey. No more wine. I like straight bourbon. Baby, you try the ride.
Thank you for tuning in. We again have a very special guest. I have been so lucky to have some incredible individuals to come on the show. And today we have another author. We have Cheyenne. She wrote this incredible book, and she's a survivor. She has been through a lot of things that the normal person cannot really even imagine. She grew up in a very abusive home in so many different levels of abuse, not just neglected, not just physically abused, but sexually abused, and the whole gambit. She has been through so many things, and as she grew and as she matured, she found herself in a lot of these exact same abusive situations. And as she went through her life, those things grew and those things kind of multiplied. A lot of times there's that strange thing within people that they find themselves, I don't want to say attracted to, but other things are attracted to them. Those situations and those scenarios are attracted to them. And she found herself in this scenario so many times throughout life. And really, if you have not picked up the book, you need to check out Unbreakable. Whenever it says it's a chilling memoir of survival, multiple kidnappings, and a search for justice, it truly is that. She's been through so much, and we here on the podcast, we want to give voices to the people who may not be feeling like they're heard. We want to defend those people who are unable to defend themselves in a lot of ways. So we have this incredibly strong woman who is speaking up, who wrote this account, and who is speaking out against abuse, against neglect, against a system that in many ways, as we know, are broken. So I would like to turn it over to Cheyenne. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for allowing me to share my story. My story really is going from brokenness to finding triumph. And I hope that my story will help inspire others. I went from somebody who survived a horrific childhood and miraculously survived multiple kidnappings as a young adult to being a certified life coach in college to become a mental health therapist. And I hope that my journey can really help others find their inner strength.
That's so incredible. You are a testament to that strength, to that resilience, and what I often also refer to as grit. So sometimes you can be strong and you can be resilient. And a lot of those scenarios, in my mind, that's whenever you're choosing that situation to be strong in, to be resilient in. Now, whenever it comes to grit, a lot of times that's whenever you're still strong and you're still standing up, but it's also whenever you don't choose the situation, whenever the situation kind of chooses you. So you have made extreme progress, like you mentioned. So we talked about being an author. Now we've also got this new lens. You're an author, you're an advocate, and you're also a certified life coach that's going out to help people. That is your purpose, that is your mission. And then on top of that, you're adding in, you're going through higher education to become a mental health therapist,
Correct, yes.
like a counselor.
Correct, yes.
That is absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible. And reading your book, your experience with education is not what the normal person experience whenever it comes to education. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your educational background?
Absolutely. It was very unconventional. When I was in kindergarten, my mother showed up one day and abruptly pulled me out of the kindergarten classroom. And I then spent most of my childhood essentially not being in any school. I was briefly enrolled in first grade for a couple of weeks, maybe a month, and I was pulled out abruptly. My mother was a severely mentally unwell addict. And so, with my childhood, even though on paper she had said that she was homeschooling myself and my older siblings, she really wasn't. Aside from the horrific abuse that I endured, it really was a matter of essentially teaching myself how to read. And once I taught myself how to read, books became that outside outlet for me. So I had really no educational background until I got my GED and enrolled in college.
Yeah. So your mom was, from her background, a teacher.
She was actually a teacher. That's the ironic part of it is that she had been a straight A college student before she was an addict, and she actually worked as a teacher before she had children. And by the time I came around, I was the 10th child. She had already been in the depths of opioid addiction and mental health. And so she just did not want us in school.
Right. So that also adds to the plausibility of the officials whenever they're saying, oh, well, we're homeschooling. Oh, well, she's a teacher. So it was a very effective mask for her to wear to the world whenever in reality things were very different at home.
Correct. Yes, she never really sat down to really help us study or anything of that nature. I can maybe recount maybe 3 times in my childhood where she briefly sat down to try to teach me math, and that was it. In fact, one day she saw that I was trying to study on my own because she did not want me to get any higher education. She began to scream at me and tell me that she was going to leave me and abandon me because she saw me trying to better my education. And I hope that kind of sheds a little bit of light into the depths of her sickness and her wanting to oppress and not give her children the education that she even had.
Absolutely. And there's so much stuff there. And you just wanting to overcome, you taught yourself to read by watching subtitles. By whenever shows were on, you put the subtitles on, and that's what helped you learn how to be able to read. Is that correct?
Yes, it was that and mainly memorizing labels. So a bottle of ketchup says ketchup on it. And so once you pick up on those patterns of, okay, this is what it means. Movie titles, Titanic, Titanic, the TIT. And so I would memorize labels of everything, and that helped me to eventually learn how to read.
That is truly phenomenal, and the strength that you had and the willingness to be like, "No, I'm gonna get better regardless of the situation, regardless of what's going on in my life. I'm finding ways that I can do today, every day, to improve my situation and to climb out of this hole that I'm in." So, a lot of what you're saying really resonates with the heartbeat of my mission moving forward. I was very blessed. I was not raised in an abusive household, but I do know that many people were. And some of my close friends grew up in cycles of abuse, even in my community, that many people were not aware of. And as time goes on, they are getting voices. Blind eyes are being opened. Advocacy is occurring, but it's only going to occur with the strength of people like yourself raising their voice and speaking out against it. So I want to applaud you and say thank you so much for writing this book, for being willing to come on this show, for doing everything that you do for so many different lives to speak out against these cycles of trauma.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And another vision that I have is that we can break some of these cycles of generational trauma. And a lot of that occurs by one, people being willing to speak up to raise awareness, and also for us ourselves to do the personal work that we need to do to free ourselves from some of those chains of that trauma and that cycle so that we don't pass it on. So this is going to be maybe a bit uncomfortable, but can you talk to us about some of those abuses that you endured growing up? Because I think they're a lot more common than most people realize. And by hearing you say it, I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people who have endured abuses either in their childhood or in their adult life.
Absolutely. So I was abused in pretty much every single way one can think of. There was the mental abuse, where my mother would seclude me in our bedroom because she made me sleep in her bed and tell me periodically, pretend that you don't exist. No one wants you here. And to hear those horrific words on top of being secluded and locked in a bedroom, kept out of school for so long was just one facet of the mental aspect of it. There was also the physical complications from it. My mother used to force me to lay in bed with her for hours, days on end, and I now have a deformed vertebrae in my neck, which causes me chronic neck pain because of the fact that it was chronically as my bones were forming, she would have me lay in bed with her. And unfortunately, things took an even darker turn when my mother essentially forced me to be in an incestuous relationship with her. And it was something that took years of therapy for me to fully comprehend. I knew that things happened that I was not comfortable with. I did not want that physical intimacy, but I did not think of it as sexual at the time. And that kind of goes to show the indoctrination of the fact that I was manipulated. And I thought on some level it was normal to have this physical touch of blurring boundaries between myself and my mother. So she did many very vile things that we can all agree on were downright appalling. Also, something that my mother would do as a form of abuse would be drug me against my will. So, starting when I was a very small child, my mother used to force me to take small dosages of her drugs. And then on a couple of occasions, she gave me adult dosages of her drugs. So, from a very young age, I had already known what it felt like to be under the influence of drugs. So, there was a lot of different levels of this horrific abuse.
It is truly appalling, as you said. And these are descriptions of ways that these abuse cycles continue. So, from putting a word on it, like in a lot of ways, you were groomed. You were groomed to be whatever it was in her life that she felt she was missing, whatever it was that she did not have, but in her mind she felt she needed. So instead of finding the healthy adult way to express it, she projected that onto a young child who was not in the position to handle it, accept it, or for it to even be in any scope of the imagination right.
Absolutely, absolutely. I feel, and I mentioned this in the book, I feel that she was craving the intimacy of her husband and he was never around. So I feel that she turned that to me because I remember being 7 years old and we had just moved into the new house. And she said to me, I was looking outside the bedroom of my new supposed bedroom. I was so excited. And she said to me, like a pin dropped, Cheyenne, you're sleeping in my bed. And I just knew in my heart that meant something not good was going to happen. And it certainly did not turn into something that was pleasant.
Right. Right. And so you said that you had 9 other siblings,
Correct.
and from reading the book, but of course the listeners don't know until they dive in, and I do encourage you guys, check out this book, read it. You'll have a much deeper understanding of Cheyenne, but you had siblings, some of whom lived with you and some of whom did not.
Correct.
And in that dynamic, it also created a lot of also unsafe scenarios where it wasn't just your mother or your father who were abusive in their different ways, but also you had a very violent family, brothers, siblings. Would you mind sharing some of that dynamic as well?
I would love to. So I had another childhood abuser, and that was my brother who was 7 years older than me. And in the book, we call him Trevor. He showed really the early signs of being a sociopath. And I am not exaggerating in any way, shape, or form. If you read the book, you will read about the absolute horrors that he projected onto me during my childhood, including killing our family dog and trying to kill my other brother. He was so violent that, and I discuss it in the book, he and my other brother ganged up on my oldest brother on his birthday and decided to kill him or try to kill him. So I was only 10 years old and they got angry, and it's a little graphic for the listeners. So I will glaze over it. And if you want to read more details, it's in the book. But they essentially gang up on him and try to kill him. And it was a very violent, bloody encounter. And after having witnessed that, Trevor would continually taunt me and he would say, "Oh, we're going to go ahead and we're going to finish the job." And he would do these psychological things that were horrific after I had witnessed this attempted brutal murder. But then also, he had this horrific, violent streak that he loved to take out on me in multiple ways. I remember one instance, and I mentioned this in the book. I was only 10 years old and I had done something that he did not like. I had gotten on the computer very briefly. And this was one of the few times that I was actually allowed to leave the bedroom that I was always locked in with my mother. So I was on the computer just for a couple minutes, probably looking at like doll photos or something very little girlish. And all of a sudden, he comes up behind me and he starts choking me. And not to be too graphic, but this was a really clear highlight into the depths of his depravity is he comes up behind me and he starts choking me and I can't breathe. And I'm clawing at his hands to try to break free. And he is the size of a grown man at this point. And I feel myself about to pass out. And afterwards, after he is done choking me out, I remember I was able to finally escape, and I look in the mirror, and he had choked me out until the color had drained from my lips. And I remember seeing that in the mirror and being so horrified. I was only 10 years old, and he choked me until the color drained from my lips. And that I think should show just how dark of an individual he is up until this very day. And something that I do mention in the book is that I actually had filed a police report against him for all of the childhood abuse, and the police have done nothing. And that is just another sign of how our justice system has failed.
Right. That is appalling. And just to kind of continue in this same vein for a little bit, the assault on your older brother. I'm trying to remember the details. I know that it was a combination of Trevor and another brother who was a little bit younger than him,
Mitch.
Mitch, and they used a object like a wooden plank or something. Didn't they strike him?
Yes. So on his 30th birthday, my older brother's Joshua, his 30th birthday, they decided to gang up on him. And I feel that the root of this was caused by jealousy because Joshua was obviously our mother's favorite child. So instead of celebrating his birthday, they decide to try to kill him. As he's coming to the house, they gang up on him and they break off the banister and they start beating him. And his face was covered in blood. And then Trevor ganged up on him and pinned Joshua when Joshua passed out from the beating and said to Mitch, as he's pinning Joshua, who's already passed out, his arms up behind his back, saying, hit him in the face. And they're trying to kill him. And then Trevor leans down and he bites Joshua's ear open. And I was only 10 years old at this time. Even though I saw this horrific fight break out and I was only a little girl, I actually tried to jump in and save Joshua. I tried to jump in and save him because I saw that what was happening was so horrific and so wrong. And I remember just being thrown to the side. And it's interesting because my mother was present. My other sister, who's much older than me, was present. But I was the one who tried to jump in and truly save Joshua. And miraculously, Joshua survived that horrific beating. But even after that, Trevor actually tried to trick my mother into bringing Joshua back to the house and said, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mom. We'll never do this again. We want to see Joshua and have a makeup. And then later on, I heard him joking with Mitch saying, oh, yeah, we'll have her bring him over. Then we can finish the job. He was so callous. He wanted to kill him. He joked about, I bit his ear open. I beat him till his face was covered in blood. And he was aroused by it. He used to hurt our animals before he killed our dog, and he would be aroused by hurting these poor, innocent animals. And it's really disgusting that this man has never gotten any help. And it is even more appalling that the cops have done nothing. I actually had reached out to his wife. I write about this in the book. I wrote a letter to his wife on Facebook, just outlining the horrible, disgusting things that Trevor did. And she blocked me within 5 minutes. Like, can you just fathom how one woman can completely just discount another woman's experience? I can't fathom that whatsoever. If somebody reached out to me and said that someone I was involved with had horrifically abused them as a child, I would have more self-respect and more dignity than to block them immediately. I would hear that woman out.
Right. And I think that is the natural response. So a few things that I'm hearing out of this is I really value and appreciate your natural response to be a protector, to be a defender, to even in the face of unimaginable odds against you, two grown men or pretty much grown men, and then another guy being beaten to death with a weapon,
Yes.
and you still try to jump in and protect the other person, to save the other person, even though you knew that that would be potentially disastrous for you. And then also speaking to the wife of this abuser, saying, hey, here's some issues. You need to be aware of it. Please seek help, get help. And you still had that within you to be strong enough and want to protect other people. And that is highly valued. Thank you so much for doing that, for being that person. And then just kind of like dissecting this a little bit more, taking the scalpel in, peeling back a layer. From what I have seen and observed in various situations, is the abuse cycle for someone who's already in a situation like that, if they do entertain someone who might free them or someone who might see them for who they truly are and what they truly are, that almost always perpetuates and increases the abuse cycle.
Mm.
So for her, as a woman who is married to this guy, he is no different in that relationship than he was with any of his other relationships. She is abused. She is targeted. She is the victim of a lot of violence herself. So in any of that revelation, she knows that it is only going to get worse. If anything comes to light, it's not going to get better. It's not going to be a big exposition where it's like, oh, he's exposed. All of a sudden, now I'm free. No, now I'm exposed. Now he wants to hide it even more. And where is he going to project that violence and that anger? Probably right back at her. What I've seen, a very unfortunate part of the cycle, is every time you think that you're close to freedom and advocacy, it almost makes it worse.
That's a good point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Would you, I mean, if you agree with that, great. If you don't agree with it, that's totally okay. And if you can think of some place in your life that reaffirms that, we would be happy to hear you share your thoughts on it, either pro or con.
I do agree that could be a reaction of her, a knee-jerk reaction to almost like a self-preservation. Now, also on the other side of the coin with that, it's written in the book a little bit. I feel that there is responsibility there as well. If you recall in the beginning of the book, I discuss how I went to go and give them both a hug and they both turned their bodies away from me. She shared in that. Now, yes, I do believe that there is most likely abuse happening in her marriage. And I appreciate you shedding light on to the fact that could have been very well a big contributor to her reaction. Well, I'm a communicator, so I'm big on that communication aspect and wanting to talk things out. But yes, I feel that if we look at the grand scheme of things, it's just another way that the toxicity of our childhood affected us in different ways.
Absolutely. And so some of my hope for the future, we are doing this. It's not one person's effort alone. It is a group, and you're a huge part of that. And what we are doing is we are turning the tide of mental health care in the United States, and we are shaping a brighter and a better future.
Absolutely.
And it's because of your work, your effort, your advocacy, and the experiences that you've been through. And you recognize them as these big struggles and challenges that most people cannot even relate to. The neglect, not being able to be educated, having to find ways to learn how to read, and then also get into a college and then be an author. Like these are major hurdles and major successes and major milestones that most people don't even get to experience, and you have just been knocking them out.
Well,
So
thank
that is
you.
a test. Yes, it's a testament to your strength, to your resilience, to your grit, and to all of these wonderful attributes that you're sharing with the world to make it a better place.
Thank you so much. That means a lot.
And it is very true. It is very true. So you have endured a lot. You have overcome so many struggles. You self taught yourself just how to read, how to write. In many ways, those were also caused you to be a target growing up. But you didn't just go through those things and survive. You also said, no, I'm going to go bigger. I'm going to make this world a better place. I'm going to do what I can. So, from someone with had to fight their way through an education, didn't go to traditional high school, had to get a GED just to have an equivalency. And then now you're an author, you have college experience, college education, and you're going into a very difficult degree field that involves a lot of study, a lot of research, and you have fought through so many things, and you're doing a lot of things to make the world a better place, to improve other people, to help others get better. But even it wasn't like, okay, you got freed from your high school age and your teenage years. Now all of a sudden you can live whatever it was that you maybe had envisioned, you kind of found yourself trapped in some of the same cycles that you lived growing up. Would you mind telling us a little bit about that transition and how maybe your childhood might have affected or impacted you moving into adulthood?
Yes, absolutely. So when I was about 19 years old, I had moved from my childhood home after my mother's passing from cancer. And I ended up being taken in by this ministry couple. And I write a few chapters about them in the book. And they had presented themselves as being the loving parents that I never had. And they knew that I was desperate for love and acceptance. And unfortunately, they pulled me into this almost cult like nightmare where they invited me into their home, but the wife would threaten to hit me if she were upset. In fact, she did hit me at one point and left a hand mark on me. Really, it was like I was almost reliving an abusive childhood because I was brought into this environment under the guise of loving, godly parents that I never had. And soon things just take this darker turn where the wife hit me because I accidentally stubbed my toe and uttered a curse word, or she threatened to hit me if she were upset about something. And they also had very creepy behaviors where they want me to tell them if I masturbated. They want to ask about the length of my pubic hair. They really, in hindsight, I see how creepy and horrific that whole situation was. And then leading out of that, it felt like I was subconsciously so used to these dark patterns that I fell in line with dark patterns of toxicity and abuse throughout my childhood. And I had to become self aware to realize, oh, I am subconsciously putting myself in dark situations. That's why I survived being kidnapped several times as a young adult. And then that leads into where I meet the man who really changed my life in the most unpleasant way possible. And that is where we talk about where I met the person we refer to as Jake in the book. And that is the man who really seems, in hindsight, to be my mother reincarnated. Just so much of those similar abusive patterns.
Right. So you found yourself in these very abusive, troubling, awful scenarios. I remember, just to kind of tie it back in some more, is your brother beating your other brother, the pool of blood that you had to clean up, and they didn't take him immediately to the hospital.
So, my mother and I got him out of the house after the beating, and we ended up going to a motel. And I think it was pretty horrific that he was not taken immediately to a hospital. My mother leaves her 3 children, the 2 boys who tried to kill him and my sister, at the home, and takes my oldest brother, the victim in this case, and myself to a motel in Reno. And I remember that being so horrific. He was just crying. He had lost so much blood and he was so cold in the motel that he asked my mother to crawl in bed with him because he had lost that much blood. And it was such a horrific thing, and that she waited a day to take him to the hospital. And I think in hindsight, she always had this fear that CPS was going to be called again because it had been called several times. And she had just slipped through the cracks and she feared having her children taken away. However, yet she did really nothing to provide a loving, safe environment for them. The horrific that absolutely Trevor and Mitch should have been charged. They absolutely should have been charged, and they didn't. And things got worse. And then our family dog gets murdered by Trevor. And it's these things that I think any normal, rational mother would have said, okay, these boys are a danger. They need to be out of the house immediately. Charges need to be filed. But she didn't. And Joshua did not file charges against them. And it was to protect them because they were still youth. But it really wasn't okay. Charges should have been filed when I was 10 years old and he overpowered me and choked me until my lips lost color. Charges should have been filed when I was a little girl and he threatened to slit my throat with a rusty knife.
Absolutely.
Charges should have been filed when he got aroused by cutting off a head of a live animal. But again and again, there was that failure to protect. And it was all around. And Joshua faced that as he was not a good person, but he faced that also, that lack of protection when she waited a whole day before taking him to the hospital.
Yep. Now that you're bringing those details back around, it's coming back to me. They did wait a long time to get him to the hospital. They finally did. And the way that fear and complex PTSD can manifest itself and can affect our behaviors is astounding. We are not ourselves whenever we are living in complex PTSD in those environments that shape it. And then even after we get out of them, we're still very much affected by that. And there's broken people everywhere. There's people who have endured things like yourself that a lot of times we don't always see, we don't always know. And that affects them even into adulthood. And here you are, you're working through things, you got your part-time job at the library, you're trying to get some of your own autonomy
Mhm.
and be your individual person and grow and mature as a human and as an adult. And then you find yourself into a world where you're seeking maybe some relationships and things
Mhm.
like that. And how does that transition in your world? How'd that go?
It's a great question. And that really circles back around to when I met the person that we refer to as Jake. I was at the store and I had seen him in the store, and I lived at this point in a primarily white town. And to see someone so exotic looking, so handsome, like at this point, I'm 21 years old and I am just head over heels. I see this man who is drop dead gorgeous, and he starts to sing to me in the store, and I head over heels. I see this Asian looking man with blue eyes. He just looked like a fresh sip of water in this desert, and I melted. And we end up becoming into a friendship that blossoms into a romantic relationship. And unfortunately, things go very dark with this individual. And I faced horrific, horrific abuse at his hands.
Yes, and I think that in some of these realms, like, you grew up with it in your family, that was the norm, even though it was wrong, it was terrible and appalling, and that is something that we seek to change and that we want to improve for the United States, for the world at large, and that's what we're working on. But then it's almost sounds like this was a very out of left field experience, if you were. It was so unexpected. You had an understanding of who this person was. And then as you get to know them and as time goes on, all of a sudden you realize, oh no, he is not this person. Now it's a shock, a surprise, in a lot of ways, a betrayal. And you find yourself with someone who is very much like all of the people that you grew up with.
Absolutely. And as I mentioned before, it really seemed like he was my mother reincarnate. Truly, there were so many disturbing parallels. But with this person, he sensed and he knew that I had had a horrific childhood. And he knew that I was still essentially just a kid. I, at age 29 right now, I think of 21 still being childlike, especially since in some weird way I was so kept from the world for so many years. And he really manipulated that to his benefit. And it started off very slow with these red flags of controlling. It started off saying, nobody's going to love you like I do. Your whole family has let you down. No one will ever put in the effort into making your life better like I will. No one will care about you the way that I do. And saying these things, I believed it. Here I am, essentially this nerdy girl who has blossomed into looking a little bit more womanly. And now I'm getting this attention and hearing all of these things by this gorgeous man that I want to hear. Then things get even darker and darker, where he's controlling my outfits. He's controlling how I do my makeup. He's telling me to dye my hair black and my pubic hair black. He's controlling even those aspects of me. And then it gets worse, where he is now not letting me use the bathroom by myself. He is insisting that he goes into the bathroom with me every single time I have to use the restroom, and literally fighting himself when he first tried to come into the bathroom with me to be in there while I'm in there. I said, no, no, thank you. And I try to close the door because he's getting forceful. And he says things to me because he's upset. He's mad. Like I'm fighting him about following me into the restroom because I want my privacy. So he digs at the most tender, sensitive scars of my past. And he says to me, you were molested as a little girl. You were molested by your mother. She put things inside of you and she damaged your little body. You're ruined now. And he's yelling this as I'm trying to shut the door in his face because I want my privacy. And he hits at that nerve. And eventually I just give in. I just collapse essentially. And I'm hit at like the most sensitive part of me to get his way. And that shows how he was just getting darker and darker. And as you read in the book, his abuse went so much more beyond that.
Yes, and absolutely. And I do remember that one of the major instances that you related that you were kidnapped, held against your will, was in a bathroom.
Yes. And that happened after the fact. So, with the first time that he had kidnapped me, it was when we were at his apartment on his parents' large property. He had his own apartment. And we're in the bathroom and he's playing his guitar. And I spoke while he was playing his guitar. He wanted to be a famous musician and all of these things, bragging about his albums. He had let out a couple little albums that didn't really do that well. And I talked while he was playing his guitar and he yells at me. And he's just being rude. And this was, I would say, earlier on in our dating. And I said, no, I'm going to leave. I'm not going to have someone speak this way to me. So I get up and I try to leave the bathroom. And he blocks himself in front of the door so I can't leave. And he pushes me down and he knocks me down. And he says, you stay here until I'm done with you. You don't leave until I say so. And I tried to get up and escape again. And he pushes me and he knocks me down. And he held me hostage in his bathroom for 30 minutes. And that was the first time he kidnapped me. And unfortunately, each time he kidnapped me, it got worse and worse.
Right. And so this kind of highlights on, I think, an important part of the healing cycle. And that is one, you have to feel safe. You have to feel safe in order to heal. You're not going to overcome the trauma unless you're in an environment where you have some safety. And then another big important piece to that is having your own personal boundaries, having your own self, your own identity, your own being that is separate from the abusers, the situation, whatever. And a lot of times that is contrary to anything the abuser wants. They want control, they want power, they want to be able to assert themselves into you and influence you the way that they want to. So, multiple times throughout your book, you have shared how you did try to work those boundaries, how you did try to defend yourself with the couple who took you in and you tried to have boundaries with them and they still abused you in a different way, in a more emotional, narcissistic way. And then you tried to have your boundaries with Jake. And one, I applaud you for standing up for yourself, for sticking up for yourself, for working on those things. For anyone who's listening who might be going through some of these same scenarios, who might be finding themselves in cycles of abuse, those boundaries are strong, they're important, they're part of your healing process. So I would really love to hear you share some, Cheyenne, on how you developed them, how you asserted yourself, and how that interplayed in your experience.
Yes. So I learned to develop boundaries after years, as you've mentioned, of different scenarios where people continually violated my boundaries, especially Jake. In the book, it talks about in a lot of detail of how he continually violated those boundaries. I learned the sanctity of my own energy and my own body. And I learned that it really is a privilege to be in my space, to be around me. And that is not coming from a place of being stuck up or thinking that I'm holier than thou. It's that we all, as humans, we all have this sacred energy within us and around us. And once you realize that you can choose who you allow in, and choose how close you let people get in. You can have these gates around your temple, which is your body, your mind, your soul, all of these things, that really took years to establish. And it's something that I still have to apply and actively practice for my own sanity. Yes, as you've read in my book, there have been numerous occasions where I've survived several horrific kidnappings. Of course, my boundaries have been infringed upon. My basic human rights were infringed upon and stripped from me during these kidnappings. So I really had to give myself the gift of learning boundaries and applying those daily.
Yes. And kudos to you for, I mean, it's not easy. Those are hard fought wins, but you did it, you fought through it, and you have now become a very incredible, powerful woman in your own right. So we'll move a little bit more into how this kind of drama unfolds. So now you have this blossoming romance, but you're already seeing the red flags. You're already noticing, oh my goodness, this is my mom reincarnated. I am finding myself in the exact same situation that I tried to free myself from. And now this tall glass of water, this beautiful, gorgeous man is now the object of what I want and what I desire. But at the same time, it's also a mirror and a reflection of everything that I'm trying to escape. So you were caught in a little bit of a,
Yeah, I was. At the time, I didn't realize that he was my mother reincarnate. I knew that it was an awful situation. And I also knew that I felt like, at any rate, that he was the only one who loved me. Because, as mentioned, he knew I had a horrific childhood. He knew everything about me. And he used that against me to say the things of, oh, I love you. No one will love you the way I do. Words of that to that effect. So I was pulled in, pushed out, and pulled back in where he would surprise me with gifts. And then he would get angry and he would destroy those gifts, say that he loved me and all of these things, and then completely tear me down. It was really a push and pull. So disturbingly, where he even used psychological warfare and had his friend essentially post these awful things about me all over Facebook because he wrongfully accused me of stealing money from him.
yep,
And later on, he admits, oh, no, actually, that didn't happen. But by then, my photo had been plastered all around Facebook in a small town
right.
with lies about me. So there were these aspects, and it did unfold even more so. I cannot recall the amount of times that this man did horrifically abusive things to me, but I can recall a time specifically where he got upset with me and he tried to light my hair on fire. And he chased me around the room trying to light my hair on fire. It wasn't just locking me in the bathroom for 30 minutes. It was secretly watching me while I showered. I caught him one day watching me while I showered. He peeked through the door. It was secretly recording me while I slept. And I actually discovered while he was going through his photos on his phone, showing me something. I said, babe, what's that? He clicked on it. He said, oh, you just look so, peaceful and sexy while you slept. So I recorded you. And he had recordings of me sleeping. It was flicking cigarette ash into my face. It was kidnapping me. It was threatening me with a weapon. It was kidnapping me and doing horrific things to me. It was all of these awful situations that really did unfold. And I am blessed that I survived all of these horrific things. And that's one of the reasons why I use my voice is because of what I've survived and endured. And to also highlight these patterns of abuse and how they can pour out into other facets of your life. Because if I had been a healed woman, I would never have even given a second glance to somebody who mistreated me. I would have left after the first red flag. I wouldn't have stayed until he did horrifically unspeakable things to me.
Right. And I think that's a lot of ways that people find themselves trapped and they find themselves in cycles of abuse, even if the names of the actors change, even if the circumstances change, the underlying problems that people like project onto others and the way people, predators, will isolate the victim. They will use everything in their power to psychologically take their power away. And a lot of times it was knowing those triggers, knowing your past and weaponizing it against you and using those words that would cause you to, I mean, at the end of the day, we're kind of animals. You know what I mean? Like, yes, we're human. We have this brain up here, but we also have this nervous system that is designed to fight, flight, posture, submit. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And if someone who knows these things, and whether it's because they were conditioned on how to use them, even if they don't mentally know them, they were conditioned on how to use these techniques and these things. And so now they're putting you into freeze mode, into submit mode, because maybe that's how they were raised. Maybe that's what they experienced. And now they are just doing what they learned and what they knew. And they've isolated you. They've found their target. And now they can use what they do to control you and to get whatever expression is that they want. And that dichotomy of power and control and using the nervous system against you, which kind of makes me think a little bit about I'm probably past the trend. I'm like, I'm not the person that's on like the viral stuff or whatever, but there's a debate online about a man or a bear.
Mhm.
Would a woman rather encounter a bear in the wild or a man in the wild? So just kind of wanted to spin it your way and get your input on that question.
That is a great question, and I think my answer might be a little surprising. I'm a very literal woman. So, despite the fact that I have been kidnapped by 2 different men, I have been raped by multiple men, and I have faced horrific encounters. Logically speaking, I would choose the man because a bear could probably eat me. And a man, at least now, I think I could hold my own if I'm. So we have to look at the logical aspect of it. What is the percentage that a man in the woods would attack me? Despite my whole encounters with men who have done horrific things to me, I take responsibility, at least somewhat, to know I put myself in those dangerous positions. So the percentage of a man being in the woods trying to harm me, I would like to say is fairly low to 50-50. Now, if he did try to harm me, I'm pretty confident that I could at least claw out his eyes and somewhat survive.
You believe that even with the man, that you've got the better chance and somewhat survive. Is that what I heard there?
Essentially, yes, because with a bear, the likelihood I really would rather not have my face eaten off. With a man, despite my history of having horrific encounters with men, I know that most likely he would not be a predator, but if he was, then I'm pretty confident that I could hold my own and claw out his eyes and escape.
Still survive. You're still surviving. Like with the
Yes.
bear, hey, you might be in the belly.
Yes. And then
Gotcha.
out of the belly, which would be no fun.
Yes. Yeah. No, nobody needs that. So that's a great perspective. Thank you for sharing it with us. I think that all of your reasoning there like makes a lot of sense. And kind of caveating with that is essentially, I said this before, and I'm not trying to like diminish things, but at least a base level, a lot of us are just animals
Mhm.
on that conditioned response. And once we get driven into those areas, we are not acting with these mental faculties and with the brain and the logic that we've been given. We are triggered and we are forced into, some people call it like the reptilian brain, or you know what I mean, your lizard
Yeah.
brain or something like that, where it is literally just in survival mode. And my experiences with complex PTSD showed me that in very real ways, in how my behaviors, my actions, the things that I would do, and the person that I became was not me, was not human, was not the real person that I am. But it took work, both on my part and through a team of medical professionals, that helped me heal and helped me get better and helped me find the human aspects of myself so that I could, in turn, be the person that I was before. And of course, there's been change, but be more myself with all this new experience and all this now new desire and drive to help other people who are kind of at the mercy of their nervous system without the tools.
That's a great, great point that you made. How much the nervous system has a role in this. And I feel like that's something that really needs to be highlighted. The whole connection between mind, body, and spirit. I absolutely believe in. And in hindsight, I can see, oh, when nervous system is dysregulated, when you subconsciously hang on to patterns that you're used to, you subconsciously walk into dangerous situations, like in my case. And as mentioned, I'm so grateful that I miraculously survived several kidnappings at the hands of different men, the main one being Jake.
Yeah. So if you don't mind, maybe going into a little bit more of that story on how, you did get led down this little trail, even though you knew, hey, this is bad. Well, maybe you didn't know, but you were seeing red flags, things are going, but you still felt yourself kind of trapped in this relationship. Would you mind sharing kind of on that?
Absolutely. So again, I held on to those words that he said, those sweet nothings. I held on to the fact that I know I was attracted to him and he was charming and we did have nice times together. And he told me all the time how much he put effort into me. I saw other women look at him. I saw other women want him. And I felt so happy that I was the one on his arm. And it's all very trivial now in hindsight. At the end of the day, he was just an attractive, charismatic sociopath. And I held on to it because I wanted to believe that he loved me. So, leading into the second kidnapping, it was much more brutal than the first kidnapping. We were at his apartment and an argument erupted, and he started the arguments. He started them. And a lot of the times that theme was, oh, he feared I was cheating on him. He feared that. So, I was done. I knew that he got violent because he had already pushed me during the first kidnapping. So in my mind, when he started to yell at me with this fear that I was cheating on him, I just decided I'm going to get up and leave. I'm going to leave. And I get up to go to the top of the stairs because you have to go to the top of the stairs to go down out. That's how his apartment was set up. I tried to escape his anger. So I leave out to escape his apartment and he runs out in front of me and he blocks my way and I see that he has a weapon. And this has completely changed the dynamics. He's never used a weapon with me before. So he holds a weapon up to me. He holds the blade to my
Like a
face. And
big sword, right?
it was an actual sword, an actual heavy sword. And he held it up to my face. And I will never forget it. He said, if you try to move past me, things will get ugly. And I remember it was in disbelief. I had a weapon in my face. I tried to escape an escalating situation, and I had a weapon in my face. And I knew that I could not leave now. He had blocked my way, and there's a blade in my face. So he basically essentially orders us back into his bedroom. And there's this fear that just overtakes me, knowing I can't leave now. He has changed the dynamics completely. And so he then proceeds to yell at me, scream at me for 2 long hours where I am not free to leave. And like one point, he puts his hand over my mouth and he's yelling at me because I'm crying. Well, I had to talk my way essentially out of that situation. I had to convince this deranged man with a weapon that I was not cheating on him for him to eventually let me go after 2 hours. And that was the second time he had kidnapped me. And at the time, I did not think of these as kidnappings, as bizarre as that sounds, because I was so wrapped up into this. I just knew it was horrific. So finally, he lets me go, and I am driven by a friend to the police station because I knew it was not okay. I knew it was not okay, even though I didn't necessarily think of it as the word quote unquote kidnapping. I knew it was not okay to be held hostage and threatened with a weapon. So I go to the police department, and they have the nerve to say to me after I said, hey, I've been held hostage by my boyfriend, and I've been threatened with a weapon. And when I tried to escape, he said, if you try to move past me, things will get ugly. And they had the nerve to say to me, well, I'm sorry, we can't do anything. That's pretty much a domestic dispute. He did not outright say he was going to kill or harm you. So we technically cannot even arrest him. They didn't even question him. And now looking back, I think that is absolutely so appalling. If somebody says, especially, a young woman says, hey, I've been held hostage for 2 hours. I was not allowed to leave the apartment. He threatened me with a weapon when I tried to escape. Absolutely, he should have been arrested right then and there.
Right.
This strange world that we live in where it's like, oh, it has to be so specific in order for you to do anything to help, but it can be so broad that you can not do anything to help, that you cannot intervene and not do what we believe the system is supposed to do, that we're raised, that we're told, that this is what the system does. We're protecting innocent people. We're doing these things for the benefit of the innocent and the underprivileged and whatever it is. Like, you have rights, but in reality, it's like one little thing gets the most heinous criminal off of the hook.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes me think a little bit about your story as well, and anything that they can look to just unburden themselves with the duty to act, the actual things that they should do. This is something that I kind of see reoccurring in my life a lot, is whenever I'm trying to advocate for the right thing, for justice, for improvement, for changes, and you're talking to all of these people and they'll use any little thing to discount you. Maybe it's because my responses are not really that extreme or overboard,
Yeah.
but to some people, they might see it that way. And then that gives them that little click. Okay, cool. Now I don't even have to do anything with this guy because he's unreasonable.
Ugh, it's unfair.
So, right. And so you've seen kind of some of this stuff play out in a different way with different words. And oftentimes, like you said, from growing up, your mother would drug you.
Yes.
And in the book, you were also forced by Jake to also take drugs, and you limited it. You did your best to not overconsume or whatever, but you knew that in the scenario you were in, you needed to do that to move it forward and to get through. So, do you mind kind of sharing a little bit about that with the audience, with the listeners?
Absolutely. So during the third kidnapping, because he convinced me that, he loved me, he would change, all these things. So I stayed after the second kidnapping. So the third kidnapping was by far the most horrific, traumatizing kidnapping. Started off as a day where we were supposed to go out. He wanted to go to the store. He wanted me to get ready. So I get ready. I get dolled up the way that he likes.
Just to go
And
to the
an
store.
argument.
Just to go to the store.
Yeah, just to go to the store, just to go to the store. And after I had spent all this time getting ready, he said, I want you to wait in the car, like he was ashamed to be seen with me. Even though I had already met his father and everyone knew we were together, he acted like he was ashamed to be seen with me. And I got upset about that. And he said, you know what? Change of plans. So he drives us out. And I thought the night would be okay. I thought there's some tension in the air, but it's going to be fine. And it turned out not being fine. It ended up with him driving on these back roads in the back of Tuolumne County, where it's this country hillbilly town with all these back spooky roads. And he drives out, and I realized we're not going back to town. We're not going back to where my apartment was, which was the plan. I said to him, I'm like, babe, where are we going? And he says to me, we're going back to town. And I knew that wasn't the case. So I had asked him again, like, babe, where are we going? And he told me to shut the F up. And then I realized something was wrong. Like, the whole energy shifted, his whole demeanor shifted. And he drives to these back roads and he tried to force me to take some meth. I didn't want to, because meth, even though he smoked it and was pretty high functioning, I would take 1 or 2 puffs at most, because anything beyond 2 puffs and I was horrifically ill. I have severe ADHD, so taking meth really calmed my mind, like I had taken an Adderall. It was not something that I wanted to do, but I had done it occasionally in the past to please him. But this time he wanted me to smoke it, and I was just like, no. I had a bad feeling about things. I'm like, no. And he overpowers me and he shoves it in my mouth and he causes me to like rip my lip. It was like a puddle of blood had poured, like filled my mouth, because he had shoved it so far. I didn't want him to break my teeth. So I smoke, and he forces me to smoke some more puffs. And thank God I have ADHD, because it did not cause me to go into psychosis or anything like that. In fact, smoking that much meth caused my mind to be very clear headed. It slowed my mind down. So I was able to understand the situation, as horrific as it was, in almost a calmer setting, though I was still terrified to my core, because I knew something was wrong. Something was going to happen. It was going to be bad. And it certainly did, because he proceeds to force me out of the car, and I'm crying. I'm trying to get home. I'm scared. I know something's wrong. And he forces me to pose for photos. He starts making me pose for his camera, and he's forcing himself to be in these pictures. Some of the pictures are just of me. He's telling me to wipe my effing tears off my face and pose for these photos. And he's forcing me to smoke more meth. And then he would get me back in the car, drive down another back road, pull me out of the car, force me to pose for more photos. I'm terrified. I'm crying. Take me home, babe. What's going on? He's telling me to shut the F up. And at one point during this horrific encounter, which lasted for 12 long hours, mind you, I was kidnapped for 12 long hours. He talks about selling me, saying that he can sell me for a few $1,000s easily.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask about, is he was making these comments and he was being very direct about, you could disappear.
Yeah.
I could sell you. I could, yeah.
Yes,
Go ahead.
absolutely. He said, you could disappear. And then I talk about it more in the book, but we have reason to believe all these years later that he actually is a serial predator. And I think that most likely he is a serial killer. And I know that sounds like a lot. However, evaluating a lot of things from the case, now with the information that I do have, I absolutely believe that. Now, I can't say for sure that he is a serial killer, but I can say most likely because he was in his mid 30s. You don't just randomly kidnap somebody 3 times. This was all
And
calculated.
you found women's clothing articles in the trunk of the
Correct.
car. There's been a lot of disappearances.
Correct.
And at the time, it didn't necessarily register. From what I remember in the book, it didn't register. You did ask about it because you're like, oh, are you cheating on me? But like later in that hindsight 2020 piece, you're like, wow, are these actual clothes of previous
Well,
victims?
absolutely. It wasn't just the clothes. It was the fact that they were of different sizes and different shapes. And it wasn't just that. It was the fact that he was taking photos because they were trophies. I realized he was forcing me to pose for photos during my kidnapping because he wanted trophies. And it was also the fact that I found out that a woman's body, her remains had been found. And this part I don't think is in the book, but her remains had been found about 20 to 30 minutes from where I was kidnapped. You can look her up online, Parrots Ferry Jane Doe. And she had been chained up and tied up. And multiple women, multiple people have gone missing. And she was taken like just from where I was essentially. All of these pieces are thrown together. In fact, I'll say this. I put all of the evidence, all of these details into ChatGPT, and I said 1 through 10, how likely is this person a serial killer? And ChatGPT said 9 or 10. And ChatGPT actually broke it down, the fact that he was in his mid-30s. This was not just a new behavior of a teenage boy acting out. This was a man who had been established. There was the calculation of the drugging, of the taking the photos, of the trophies of these used women's underwear and bras and panties, everything. It was all of this, especially given the fact of the people going missing. I absolutely believe without a shadow of a doubt that the man who kidnapped me has kidnapped other women. And that is one of the reasons why I wrote this book.
And we are so thankful that you did write this book, because there are things that need to change.
Absolutely.
There are broken aspects of society that we are in the process of dismantling, rebuilding, and trying to improve so that this is not the norm, so that
Absolutely.
criminals can get away with their behavior and continue to perpetuate violence and continue to be terrors to the community. So throughout this, you're trying to maintain your identity. You're trying to maintain your autonomy. You're also forced, coerced, extorted, all of these things into certain behaviors as a survival mechanism, just to make sure that you get out of this situation where you are in danger. You are very real in danger at someone who has a history of violence against women, of killing, kidnapping, raping, maiming, harming. And then on the other side of the occasion, or the other side of the coin, I don't remember which kidnapping this was, but I do remember one part of your story that I think is worth highlighting is we're all fighting this battle. We're all going through these different things. No one really knows what they are. They are traumatic, and we're all trying to survive. We're all trying to put on our face in the world and trying to get through it and trying to behave in the way that a normal, rational person would want to behave. And so here you are, you've just been kidnapped, might have been this scenario or a different one, and you're putting yourself together. You know what you need. You need a little bit of time. You get into work,
Yeah.
and
This was this
your
kidnapping, the
manager,
last kidnapping. Yep.
it was this one.
I
Okay.
tried to go to work after being kidnapped and held hostage. I tried to go to work. Is that not insane? Does that not show my work ethic as a person?
Yeah. And so you're just like, all right, let's just get into work. I'm going to make my
Yep.
shift. I'm going to get there. and then your manager or employer is just like cold, like icy steel cold. You didn't show up in the right colors.
Correct. It was ridiculous. I worked at this fashion boutique, and even though we were still in August, apparently they had transitioned to the fall outfits. So I show up in a dress that I had worn and gotten several compliments on before. My that particular boss actually had complimented this exact outfit before. So I come into work. She's like, "What are you wearing? This is not the right fashion colors. You need to go use your money and go buy some pieces and make your outfit fall themed," which is absolutely appalling. She could have just sent me
Right.
home and I could have changed outfits, but instead, I was told to spend my own money to change this outfit. So I changed it the best I could with like a black shawl, some necklaces, and a belt. And I spent probably like $30 on these accessories. I started to have a panic attack because I had just been held hostage. I had just been drugged for 12 hours and I'm still trying to present myself. So I go like in the back and I'm trying to compose myself. And she comes up to me. She's like, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Can I just have a moment, please? Can I just have a moment?" Rather than asking me, "Hey, what happened?" or just being a courteous person, she's like, "No, you only have 1 minute." I said, "Could I please have 5 minutes just to compose myself? I just need a few minutes." And she's like, "No, 1 minute or you're fired." And basically just fired me. It was very insane. It was so tacky. It was so trashy. I've actually worked as a hiring manager. I was an operations manager for a company. I've been a recruiter and I have supervised many employees and I have never, could not even fathom acting that way. She did not know what happened. She had no way to know that I had been kidnapped and held hostage, but she saw a young woman in distress. And rather than showing kindness, she chose to fire me.
Right. The unsympathetic people that, as someone who's recovering, as someone who is healing from these traumas, the unfortunate reality is we still have to live our lives. You're not insulated bubble of healing where you can just get better. No, you still have to actively go and live and earn and engage with this public that in many times, in many cases, does not have even the most basic understanding of what you went through, of what occurred. And they're not even taking the time to ask, like, hey, so like that to me just kind of relates to a little bit of you knowing, hey, if I had 5 minutes and I could just do the techniques that I've been working on, I could do some deep breathing, I can do some visualization, I can do something to get out of this. I know I can make it through this, but this is what I need. I need 5 minutes. And then for someone to even just look at you and be like, no, that's not what you're allowed to do. You don't get 5 minutes, you get 1 minute, and those are the rules, and goodbye. And it's like, also you buy stuff and then now you're fired. You know what I mean? Like, it's just wild the scenarios that you're gonna find yourself in when you are trying to recover, whenever you are trying to heal. So we've been talking about boundaries some, and you have been phenomenal at building them, developing them, executing them. What advice would you have for people from troubled backgrounds who might have had some traumatic experiences? What advice would you give someone who's working on developing boundaries so that they can become like you?
Thank you. That's a great question. I realize that having boundaries is a gift that you're giving yourself. And boundaries are there to protect us. And really, there's also that other layer. And I've discussed this before is that our bodies, our souls, our minds, our homes, all of these are so sacred. They really are. So when you have boundaries, you are showing yourself honor. You're giving yourself a gift that no one else is going to give you. No one else is going to have boundaries for you. You have to establish them for yourself. You can still be kind. You can still be loving. You can still be generous, but it's about protecting yourself. And once you realize that you deserve to have boundaries and that nothing compares to your emotional and mental peace of mind. Nothing comes even close. That is your top priority. You should be your top priority. Then everything else really falls into place as long as you're doing it for your highest good.
That's great advice. Thank you so much for sharing. And it's so true. You're fighting and you're creating that bubble that you need so that you can heal, so that you can continue to grow, not just heal. You know what I mean? I'm talking about surviving and thriving, but it all has to come from an area where you've developed that bubble, you've developed that boundary, that sacred place that you are, that identity that you're taking care of and nurturing and allowing to blossom. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
And I'd like to tie in a similar story from one of my friends.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear it.
So I grew up with someone, and this relates to the kidnapping. It relates to a lot of these things and violence against women and these masks and also the broken system. So I have a good friend. We grew up together. We did some of the same extracurricular activities. His big goal was to be a Marine. I was going into the Navy to do my thing. He went to boot camp, all this stuff. Anyway, so that's how we knew. We knew from like young age, high school, and we had these like shared aspirations, but we still keep in touch throughout life. We're both in San Diego at some point, or in Southern California at some point during our lives, and he's suddenly ensnared in this relationship that is way different from what his grandmother really raised him, but his mom, you know what I mean? Like his mom, so different from what his mom envisioned. I think he already may have been married, or I don't know if he was married, but he had a relationship with someone, maybe even had a kid, right? But now all of a sudden he's like hooked into this other person, right? And then there's a mutual connection. There's a guy in the same career field, Navy SEAL type, who's also kind of in the picture. But what was going on was this person that he fell in love with was a victim of human trafficking, but in a different way, not in the way that, is shown in Taken, not in the way that you think of in like the normal reality of, oh, this person's kidnapped and they're supposed to do things against their will. No, it was kind of in their own home. So her ex-boyfriend was a criminal. So he is exerting control over her and saying, nope, you can't see that guy. Nope, we're back together. And this guy's like an IT guy, like a software guy, something like that. Like he's got a very officey job, but he would take her child for days and weeks on end and basically force her to perform an online medium. I don't know what it was, but like think OnlyFans or something along those lines. And nope, you need to do this. You need to do this. You're doing this. If you don't do this, you're never going to see your child again. And so she's basically extorted and trapped in this reality. And he's going to the authorities. He's going to the cops. Like, what can we do? How can we
Yeah.
do this? Like, this is wrong. We need to save this person.
Horrifying.
This is horrific. And essentially, what the sad state of affairs is what it kind of boiled down to was you're fighting a losing war. You're fighting a losing game. They have resources. They're getting all this money. And like, who knows if this is the only victim that this guy has? Is he working with other people? Is there a network? How many people are being extorted into an economic action and activity through means like this by holding their kid away from them? And then now they're generating money. So it's like, yeah, so you're going to have lawyers and proving all of this. And guess what? They've got more means. They've got more resources. You're a disabled vet with no job. Like, what are you going to
Oh
do?
my gosh,
You
so
know what I mean?
horrifying. That's so sad.
Absolutely horrifying. And it's like, hey, man, they're just going to hold this up in court and it's just going to be a drain. And there is no justice. There is no real logical way out. And that's just really the sad state of affairs in a lot of things. And it's troubling and it's not right. And that is what we are working to correct. I'll pass it back over to you to weigh in.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. That really does highlight the failures of our current society, especially in relation to the justice system. And I feel that the more we get these stories like my own, like this one out there, the more that we can recognize these failings. And hopefully there can become a change because our society right now truly, truly needs a radical change when it comes to these vi- these vile shortcomings that are very even dangerous. They are absolutely dangerous. People's lives are at stakes. The justice system needs to take things of this nature so much more seriously. Absolutely. I hope that at the end of the day, there will be this radical change and that we don't have to live in a society anymore where women can get abused, extorted, as in the case that you mentioned, kidnapped multiple times, as in my case, and have no one in the justice system really seem to care.
Yes,
In fact, when I
absolutely.
looked at my police report from being kidnapped and held hostage for 12 hours, I was appalled. They had made me out to be some sort of addict. It felt like I had been completely discredited. Completely discredited. They said that I kept repeating myself. They said that I said I had low self-esteem. It felt like it had been manipulated to make me appear that I was mentally unstable and that this situation had not occurred. However, lo and behold, it did occur. I am a certified life coach. I am in college to be a therapist. I told the whole entire truth. And in the book, it showcases really the whole layers and the depths of this. And again, as mentioned, the police report was absolutely appalling. I think you read that about that in the book, how I was misrepresented. And that is just one of many examples of the radical change that needs to happen.
Absolutely. And in my own experience, so like I know what you went through. It was not on a police report, but I had the exact same scenario go down whenever I was seeking care for my PTSD.
I am so sorry. That is awful.
And yeah, and so like that is what so I had to go back through my notes to figure out, why am I not getting care? Why is nobody treating me? Why are they discrediting me? Why are they believing some narrative? And it is because their documentation painted the narrative that they wanted me to have, not the narrative that was true that would actually get me to the care that I needed. So I know the betrayal, the hurt, the emotions that go into looking over some documentation or paperwork after the fact, whenever you're just like, dude, something needs to change. We need help. The justice system needs help. And then you're looking at it and you're like, oh my gosh, you didn't document this to help me. You did not document this to further justice or my cause or my medical thing. You documented this so that you could paint a narrative that you wanted to believe to absolve yourself of doing your job and acting in the benefit of the citizen, the person, the end user, the person who needs it.
Yeah,
And that is, and we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier on, so many times it seems like people are just trying to find that easy button to get out of jail
absolutely.
free, to absolve themselves of doing the hard work.
It is so sad, and I'm so sorry that you had to face a similar situation. And I'm proud of you for starting this podcast and really using your gifts and using your voice to help others. I think it is so important. And I think it takes a lot of bravery to start a podcast and to share your voice and what you've experienced. So thank you again.
Yes, and I really appreciate that. And by no means, I'm not trying to make like an uneven comparison. I know that what you went through, what you endured, was on a whole different magnitude. I'm just trying to share some of those experiences and relate in the ways that I can.
I feel that it is important to share. So thank you. And I don't think it's a matter of what's more or a different magnitude. At the end of the day, we were both let down. And at the end of the day, we are both using our voice to help combat it and to shed light on these vital and appalling shortcomings.
Right. So as we kind of wrap up, I want to kind of hit on another theme that I recognized in your story and in your book. Faith has been kind of a consistent thread and theme there. You've had your triumphs with faith, and you've also had your letdowns and your betrayals. So, would you mind kind of sharing your side of faith, what that means to you, and how it lives in your life?
Absolutely. In my book, I do highlight several instances where I had been horrifically mistreated by those in organized religion. Right now, I currently hold on to faith deeply, irregardless. I feel like it has been a thread throughout my life. However, now I have more of a non denominational spiritualistic approach. So I believe in a higher power. Sometimes I pray to Jesus still, but at this point in time, I probably will not be calling myself a Christian. But I will say that I do hold my faith in a higher power very seriously. I call on my angels, I call on my guides. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now. I think faith is something beautiful and it can be really individualized to whatever works for you.
Awesome. Yeah. So, I just kind of wanted to highlight that a little bit, and your ability to heal in spite of some of the hurt that you have encountered in some of those areas. Because I think that there's a lot of people who grapple with this, who grapple with, again, these systems that we were told to trust in, that we're told to believe in. And there's some people who have been let down by those systems, who've been hurt by those systems. But a lot of the time, it's not the central core that is hurting them. It is broken people.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that you're able to have seen through that and be able to see, hey, you know what? Like, these are broken people. There's something else there. There is a higher power that I believe in. And that's really my guide. And we're going to heal through this. We're going to go through this. And you've still got a compass bearing that you can work towards. So I do want to thank you again so much for coming on the show, so much for your bravery. We truly are turning the tides of mental health, of the justice system, and the crippling effects that are being perpetuated across generations. Your voice and your story are instrumental part of this cultural revolution, and we will break the chains that are holding so many others in bondage to their past, to their addictions, and to their traumas. And if it were not for you, this wouldn't be possible. But you are that voice. You are changing that tide. You're turning the tides, and you're making a big impact. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure. Thank you again. I really appreciated this opportunity to share my story, and thank you for sharing some of yours as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on this curious roller coaster of life. If this is your stop, please exit peacefully. Enjoy the rest of your day. If you're ready for another one, just push play. Just a final note before you go, thank you, and thank you for feeling. The distillation and aging process is different for everyone. I'm not quite sure what you're ready for. Sip slowly and enjoy responsibly.
Baby says she's leaving if I don't stop drinking wine. So I switched to whiskey, now I'm feeling fine. Drinking that smooth whiskey. No more